Chris for welcoming us here, and this won't be the last you've heard them. You will be hearing from them later on, so thanks for the call to order, and now we are ordered. Good evening everyone, and we certainly would like to start today's proceedings by acknowledging that we are on the traditional territories of the Huron-Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe peoples, whose presence here continues to this day. We'd also like to acknowledge this is the treaty lands of First Nations of the Williams Treaty, and thank them and other Indigenous peoples for sharing this land with us. We would also like to acknowledge the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation, who is the closest First Nation community here in the York region. We acknowledge this land and people because the first step to reconciliation is recognizing the existence of Indigenous peoples, along with Canada's history of colonization and its continued impact. And it goes without saying that all sectors and everyone in society has a responsibility to begin or continue on an informed journey towards truth and reconciliation in their truest form. And part of the conversation tonight is really in keeping with how do we do better as individuals in a variety of ways, and particularly with homeless young people. My name is Clovis Grant, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of 360 Kids, which began over 33 years ago, and that was a time when people didn't realize that there was homelessness here in the York region, but certainly it is a need and an issue, and the organization began really in response to the community, and we exist because the community recognized that there is a need to provide supports to homeless young people. And our focus is really just that, is to improve the outcomes for our young people. And our work specifically right now is focused on 4 pillars, which is employment, education, housing, of course, and well-being. And we're going to hear a lot about well-being tonight. I'm also very privileged that over the last 3 years, the organization has been leading a work. We affectionately call it the youth strategy. There is a longer version, the youth homeless housing stabilization strategy here in York region. And with some seed money from the United Way of Greater Toronto, and now with some additional funding from Laidlaw and the Minto Foundation, we're able to continue this work where, as the lead organization, 360 Kids, we've been able to pull together other organizations, over 20 plus, and the number is growing all the time, but over 20 organizations throughout York region who are coming together along with a robust youth council. At this point in time, I would like to acknowledge a few of our elected representatives who will be joining us, some on the stage here this evening. I'm going to begin with our local member of provincial parliament, Billy Pang, who will say a few words. MVP Pang.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Billy Pang, MVP for Markham Unionville, and thank you, Clovis, for your kind introduction. Did I touch anything? Okay. It's my... absolutely, I've touched something.
Actually, that was perfect. Show your photo.
Yeah, so it's my great honor to be here, and welcome to this beautiful riding of Markham Unionville. So it's my pleasure and honor on behalf of the Legislature of Ontario and also residents of Markham Unionville, and welcome all of you here tonight to have this very important conversation. I can still remember when I was younger, which was not too long ago. I started serving as a volunteer for street kids, and then marginal youth, and then K-Chom seniors, and then Vietnamese boat people. So it's been decades that I've been serving them, and after I moved to Canada in year 2000, I started serving as volunteer for long-term care as well. So I've been long-term running as a volunteer, and I always believe that if all these organizations work closer with the government, we cannot work alone, even the government, right? We need to work together to find better ways. Just like tonight, all of us sitting here is to find a better way so that we can work together, more ideas, more innovations, more opinions, more experience that we can share so that we can move forward. So I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to 360 Kid and Away Home Canada's making tonight's event possible. So I'm also a former school board trustee for the same riding here and also a youth worker. So I always been committed to addressing the challenge faced by our youth, especially when it comes to the pressing issues of homelessness. So it's very important to me as well. So it's a matter that demands our collective attention, empathy, and most importantly, action. So we have been working so closely for like more than 6 years, right? So when I was a school board trustee, I can still remember the night, the snowstorm night that I slept on the street to experience. Well, I experienced homelessness while I was in Hong Kong, in my hometown, but never in Canada. That night was what an experience. So from then, we worked closely together for the last 6 years as an elected official. So one of the most remarkable aspects of gathering this is the inclusion of youth with lived experience from York Region Youth Homelessness Strategy. So thank you again for inviting me to be part of this crucial conversation. And let's make a lasting impact and create a brighter future for our youth. Thank you again. So I have 2 certificates, one for Away Homes Canada and one for 360 Kids. Is there a representative from 360? Okay, good, cool. Okay, let's go. Here. Thank you for spending this.
And now I'd like to invite the Mayor of Markham to come up and also say a few words. He didn't have to come far. This is Markham City Hall. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Clovis. Well, thank you very much, Clovis, and good evening, everyone. And certainly welcome MPP Billy Pang and also MPP Logan Kanapathy from Thornhill, Milliken Mills. And also just bring a quick hello from MP Paul Chang, as the federal government is the sponsor, and he says hello and unfortunately couldn't be a part of the event tonight. I want to take a moment to welcome everyone to the Markham Civic Center, an opportunity in this place to meet and to gather, and certainly always to exchange ideas. And I'm particularly pleased that this particular event is happening here at our Civic Center as a community that does experience homelessness, and particularly youth homelessness. And I think some of the other challenges as Canada's most diverse community, I think the youth in our community, if they face homelessness, they face other obstacles as well. And I think it's very appropriate that you're talking about equity-based and Indigenous issues as additional barriers that youth might face within our community here and certainly across the region. I want to thank everyone involved in this particular meeting. Certainly 360 Kids and Clovis, to you and your team, and for all the good work that you do within the region. Away Home, and also making the shift. Again, I think it demonstrates that the challenges that we face are not going to be solved by any one organization. It's about sharing information. It's about sharing experiences. It's about hearing and listening and acting on the stories that we hear. And fair to say that homelessness for youth in this community has been an issue for many years, and it's taken different forms, no doubt. So what might have been a simple issue for some in trying to couch surf and having a place to stay, we recognize that the issue of homelessness has become much more complex. And for anyone that has been a part of the community for many years, for someone that does not face language or cultural barriers, homelessness in itself is a tough issue to contend with at any age, but particularly as a young person. When it's not safe to stay in your own home, when you're not welcome in your own home, and having to find a way to get through high school and move on in a meaningful way to some kind of post-secondary education, it's a very unique time in someone's life. And we know that that time in your life, even with the support of your family, is sometimes tough to get through, let alone if you don't have a place to stay. And so I thank you for coming together, and unfortunately I can't stay for the whole discussion, but I hope that you will be in some way reporting out some of the recommendations that come not only of this meeting tonight, but subsequent meetings and efforts that you undertake. And we'll also say that within our community, we don't have a large Indigenous community here, but the City of Markham has actually been proactive in a special partnership that we formed with the Abitum First Nations, which is more than a couple hundred kilometers north of Thunder Bay. And we've been able to, through that partnership, certainly learn from each other, understand where we can be of help, and we've helped, our community has helped in numerous ways with donating sports equipment. And when I was up there to actually hear one of the female elders speak so proudly that they were able to finally have a girls hockey team in the community because of the equipment, it certainly made me proud of the efforts that individuals and groups undertook here. And since that time, we've helped out certainly during COVID, and more recently with an application that they're making for a brand new community center up there. But I'll tell you, if no one's ever been to a First Nations community and seen the conditions firsthand, it's an eye-opener to say the least, and it is a call to action. And I guess sometimes that's the challenge here, that homelessness is not so obvious in our community. Sometimes it is, but you know, homelessness, particularly for youth, doesn't always have the spotlight on it because young people can be hidden in the community. And so I really thank you not only for coming together, but for shining a spotlight on a very serious issue, a very important issue, and one that I think is one of the most noble causes where we can help young people not only find a home, a place to stay, that they're safe and can pursue their dreams, but to be able to reach their full potential. And I've had certainly the occasion to meet young people through 360 Kids and other organizations in our community. And the fact that they were able to turn their life around because they were able to get what may seem like a little bit of support to go a very long way. So with that, I'm going to also, and maybe the number of certificates will keep growing, I don't know, but we have one for 360 Kids, one for A Way Home, and one for Making the Shift. I thank all of them, but I thank all of you as well for participating tonight and making a difference in the lives of young people within our community. Housing is a right. Young people probably don't know that, but it is a right, and they have a right to have that housing within our community because they belong here. It doesn't matter where their parents have come from, which part of the world, or whether in fact, and this is the irony, that Indigenous youth face such barriers on finding a home when in fact this was their land. And so I thank all of you for coming forward and being a part of the solution. Thanks one and all. And if we could have the representatives.
So thank you for the greetings, and more to come, but what I'd like to do now is actually invite Elder Hilton King to officially open our event tonight. Elder King, I'd like to present this tobacco to you.
We're using sweetgrass because sage might set off the fire. The sweetgrass is a medicine that is a kind medicine. And we use it to anything that's said is said in kindness. Anything that's thought is thought in kindness. So it brings all our minds together in a good way. So that these are very strong medicine. So this is you're all going to get this. We'll usually open this way. I work for Nagdawin Benojiak Child and Family Services Wellbeing, and this is what we promote. We promote this way of life because this is what we inherently know that is good for the children. It's good for the children, youth, and families that we work with, because when we're talking a little bit about homelessness, identity and belonging is a big issue. So if we can ground them in who they are, and part of what their purpose in life is, we see that as a stepping stone, to getting on that good path. So we open with smudge, we open with song, and we open with prayer. And I'll do that traditionally. Like this is a traditional opening, and I'll explain it after I say the prayer. Bonjour, Mamantik Dijnakas, Megazadorem, Wasaksing Donjaba, Anishinaabe and Yao. Chumi Wishkashomas, Nagabi Wase, Aje Yen Nongo. Chumi Wishendaki, Ishuga, Women in German, Ganawa Ma, Iwa, Chigomaris, Meanwhile, Women in German. In which case, Kemikwa, Ogomisha Yam, Matsu, Ogomisha Yam, Nijam, Ogomisha Yam, Yebe, Ogomisha Yam, Nisaya. Meanwhile, Ogomisha Yam, Nisawin. Sama, Nabagidana, Wabana, Zhao Na, Nababi Na, meanwhile, Vivedna, Naramoshin, Janoshka Gabia, meanwhile, Jazon Beyan. Kenigabo, Kamisha Yam, Osa, Amadzuin. We do Krishna. Janamayang, Wayak, Jabamosayang, Chimiwach, Gijamanado. Kamija Yang Ye gets Salam, which Gabanoji, Yamana, Jumanji. Amiwach, and that prayer, I introduced myself. My given name, my status name is Hilton King. But my Nishnaba name, we call it, is Omatik, leaning tree. Good name for me if you heard my story. Maybe another time for that. But so when we do these prayers and when we do these songs, they're beautiful prayers and they're beautiful songs. They're more than that to us. They're a way of life. It's a way of life what we as helpers, as parents, aunties, uncles, what we try to promote with our children, youth, and families in our communities, because we know that, through our own lived experiences, that this is what is going to help. I am a product of the 60s scoop, and I did not have what we have here, what we're doing at our work, which I know would have made a big difference, because we promote culture. So these songs again and prayers, they do have purpose. They do have meaning. So this particular song, It was given to us by our board elder, the Honorable H. Neil Monet. He's from Beausoleil First Nation, and I'm from Wasauksing First Nation, which is up in the Parry Sound area. I'm not fluent, but I speak, but I've had to work at that because of the disruptions, as you were saying earlier, the displacements of Indigenous people. So I've had to work on my language, but it's not impossible for our children, youth and families to do that. So this song will be done in the language, and it was given to our organization. I have my in here, Amber, and it was given to our organization 4 years ago now. 4 years ago, and for when our elder came and we were designated, and this is the song we gave to the organization. And I'll sing it and I'll explain. Way up, hey yo. Talks about the children, and as has been mentioned, it is about the children, and where they are going, and that's our responsibility as helpers, as mothers, fathers, again, aunties, uncles. It's all our responsibility. So that song says, "Children up will carry the children." So the songs and the prayers is where we're connecting with spirit. When we do these things, it's not just a physical thing, right? It's a spiritual thing that we're letting. It's almost like we're putting ourselves under the guise of Creator when we do these things. We say we'll do these things. We will take care of the children. So we're letting Creator know that we're still following our way of life. And for us as an Indigenous people, those are our teachings, and I'm sure they're everybody's teachings. When we think about that and how the children are at the forefront of everything, because honestly, they're the ones coming behind us, right? They're the ones that are going to take over. So we have to do what we can for the children. So that's it. And the prayer itself, it acknowledged everything in creation. You know, I talked about the land, the water, the sky, the food, the children, the grandmothers, the grandfathers, the women. Everything in creation is acknowledged in that prayer, because our teaching is, without creation, we don't survive, right? And so when we say those prayers and offer those songs, Creator hears us, and Creator watches us. Creator isn't there to teach us lessons. Creator is there to show us love. So it's out of love that we were created. You know, so when we make like when the youth make those learning times for them, they're not mistakes. That's what we look at. You know, we look at them as lessons, because that's part of that teaching, is that we were created out of love. So all those words I offered were about honoring life, where life comes from, right? It's about honoring that way of life. And again, it is a way of life. It's I mean, I love that song, you know, and but it's not just a song. It's a way of life, and we're talking to Creator. So I hope that helps with the explanation. And miigwech is thank you. And miigwech.
Want to thank you once again for opening our event, and I'm going to ask another elder to come and join us to do an African ancestral acknowledgement, and this is Elder Lee Miller, who's Executive Director for York Regional Alliance of African Canadian Communities, and also really appreciate your work for the Black community here in York Region. So Elder Miller, please come on.
Thank you, Mr. Grant, Clovis.
Yeah.
Edra, thank you. I just want to say there is so much in common that we have as people of African descent to you. I sit there and I reflect that your land were taken from your ancestors. Our ancestors were taken from our land and brought here to the place called the Americas. I looked at, you spoke about Creator, you spoke about nature, you spoke about ancestors. So I just want to say thank you, Mr. Mayor, MPP, MP. Thank you. Drummers, thank you. It says getting from here to there. There's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. For us to eliminate homelessness, we must go together. I know Michael is going to talk about Ubuntu. I am because we are. We are because I am. We need to eliminate homelessness. Before I recognize the ancestors, I wanted to speak about libation. Libations, Jacob, in Genesis, were libation. Many of these rituals, culture were taken from us. The enslavers did not want us to be anchored We were not enslaved, we were enslaved. So for the young people here, you were never slave, you were enslaved. I want to just thank the Creator. We call by many names. God Almighty, I'm going to speak about the common names. Nana Ensmanfu, Owaje, Anansi Kokuruko, the great designer. I say thank you, Creator, for helping us, for helping the people before us, behind us, and beside us. I thank you that we can unite, and we hope we can help to eliminate homelessness within our community. I say drink. To Mother Earth, Asasaya, we thank you for being our womb. You feed us. We pollute you. We refute you. Yet, you continue to feed us. I say drink, as I salute you, Mother Earth. To the elements, Father, Son, to Mother Earth, to the rivers, for the rain, we say drink. To our ancestors. An ancestor is like a banana tree. Anyone here has been around a banana tree? Okay. A banana tree grows, and at a certain age, it brings out its fruit. You are the fruit of that banana tree. The kindness, the nourishment. After that fruit is ripened, that banana dies. One time that banana tree bears fruit, and it dies. The Bible also says, by your fruit, you shall know them. How are we helping the homeless children? Before that banana dies, you know what it brings out? Many sprouts. Our youth are the sprouts. That banana won't bring fruits and sprouts, then it dies, just like our ancestors. Ancestors like Harry Belafonte, who just transitioned. You know the song says, come Mr. Tallyman, tally me banana. Six foot, 8 foot, bunch. When the tallyman come to tally your banana, which one will it be? This size, this size, that size. What fruits will they know you by? May the ancestors drink and serve. May Dudley Laws drink and serve. May Schroeder Hall drinks. May Maya Angelou drink. May my mother drink. May my father drink. May all the people whose sturdy shoulders we stand on, the men and women who fight for social justice, the men and women who fight to dismantle racial discrimination, the men and women who are at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, we say drink, drink, drink. Moni Kasa, it's good and it's finished. God bless you all. Thank you. We gotta go outside.
You all stay here.
Okay?
Local MPP, Member of Provincial Parliament, and also the Parliamentary Assistant to the Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services, Logan Kanapathy, to come and say a few words on behalf of the Ministry. Logan Kanapathy.
Thank you everyone for coming out to this important initiative, and thank you for inviting us. And I also joined by Billy Pang, SAPP, also Parliamentary Assistant, also Mayor Scapati, Frank Scapati, and thank you for being here and thank you for your support, Markham Council, for the homelessness and indigenous community. I would like to begin by acknowledging the city of Markham, situated upon traditional territories of the Anishinaabe people and of the Haudenosaunee people. These territories are covered by Treaty 13 and the William Treaties. Thank you for the wonderful prayers. Really enlightened the room and the community. I'm delighted to bring the greeting on behalf of the Minister, Michael Paza. He's a Minister for Children, Youth, Community and Social Services. We talk about today is about children. And thank you to the two great organizations, the ABA Home Canada and 360 Kids, for bringing us all together tonight.
So we've been through a number of speakers. We've heard of a lot of important things. And now we're going to move into the core of the evening. My name is Michael Bowe, and I'm an equity and inclusion specialist. I also founded Bowes and Associates, and I'm your MC for the evening. Now, you've done a great job. Partly some of my job, but that's good. I enjoyed watching you. He's good, he's good. There's a second career in the waiting. So you heard from Negus as well as 10 Fire. Did I get that right? Okay. Say again? Fire 10. Okay. So you've heard from Fire 10 and Negus, and we're going to hear from them again. But I really want to ensure that I introduce Negus in a very formal way. And I'm not sure if we're going to get a chance to introduce Fire 10, but we'll see. I didn't get a bio, but we'll... Say again? Okay. So I would like to really formally welcome both of you, because you're going to help to continue to bring spiritual energy into the space. But I also want to introduce you formally, because oftentimes we don't get a chance to really get to know artists and what's behind their artisan. And I was so impressed with reading your bio. It's really quite telling. So Negus Medin is a holistic health therapist specializing in the areas of massage therapy, natural nutrition, and sound therapy using African Caribbean drums and music. He is also a professional master African Caribbean drummer, singer and performer who conducts workshops, classes, and tutorials. He is the proud owner of Holistic Vibrations, a 22-year-old holistic health and welcoming wellness company which offers holistic health services and products in the Greater Toronto area. So I'd like to welcome you, as well as welcome Fire 10 Entertainment to perform for you.
thank Michael for framing tonight's conversation, for all to partake in, and so let's make full use of the insight provided as we hold each other in our collective humanity. And tonight's conversation will do just that. So with that said, I'd like to introduce our panelists for this evening, who were selected specifically to inform the conversation from multiple perspectives. I'd like to introduce our first panelist, Amber Crow, the Executive Director of Denag-de-Wenmeg Benujang Child and Family Services. She's a member of the Mississaugas of Rice Lake. Amber Crow lives in Alderville First Nation, where she has lived for over 30 years. She's a wife, mother, and grandmother. She has served as the Executive Director of Denag-de-Wenmeg Benujang Child and Family Services, an Indigenous Child and Family Wellbeing Agency since 2014. With an Honors BA in Public Administration and Governance from Ryerson University, a Juris Doctor of Laws degree from University of Toronto Faculty of Law, and a Master's of Social Work from Laurier, Amber has spent most of her career working for Indigenous people and communities, including 8 years of law practice before joining Denag-de-Wenmeg Benujang. Amber believes strongly in the restoration of jurisdiction to Indigenous peoples to look after their own children, while she also has a strong commitment to reconciliation. She believes and advocates for a holistic approach to balanced healing for children, youth, family, communities, and nations. She is currently a board member for the Association of Native Child and Family Service Agencies of Ontario, a board member for the Ontario Association of Children's Aid Societies, and an expert in residence for the Child Welfare League of Canada. Please give a hand for Amber Crow. Next, we'd like to introduce you to Penny Moret, Executive Director of Addiction Services Central Ontario, the ASCO. Penny Moret has made a career spanning over 40 years working in the not-for-profit sector. Since joining ASCO in 2014, the agency has grown by 275% and is now one of the largest community addiction service providers in Ontario. In 2017, the organization was chosen to be the lead agency for addictions for York Region, North York, and South Simcoe, and Penny has worked with a number of community health service providers to ensure that a growing comprehensive system of programs and services for people affected by addictions has been developed and implemented by a group of agencies collaborating together. During her career, Penny has held a number of leadership positions in the voluntary sector and strongly believes in the importance of the role that the not-for-profit sector can play in responding to community needs and public policy development. As a settler and first-generation born Canadian, Penny is committed to continuing her own journey of learning the many impacts of anti-oppression and anti-racism on Indigenous people, Black people, and people of color while acknowledging her own experiences and that of her family. Penny believes that we all need to learn and unlearn many ideas in order for us to have an equitable and just society where all people have an opportunity to be seen, heard, and respected. Let's give a hand for Penny Moret.
So Jessie is a program coordinator of the Queer Agenda program at 360 Kids. Jessie's a youth worker with lived experience in areas of homelessness, addiction, and for organizations in Toronto and the New York region. They have worked on developing the Queer Agenda, a program which offers peer-led programming and support to suicide LGBTQ+ youth at risk or experiencing homelessness, as well as education for youth and staff in the social services sector. Most importantly, Jessie is a young educator bringing forth positive change to their communities. Can you join me in welcoming Jessie? Our next panelist is Zachary Dixon. Zachary is a member of the York Region Youth Homelessness Prevention and Housing Stabilization Strategy. It is a mouthful. Their youth council. Zachary uses his lived experiences to help create change for youth through the ERY&D Mental Health and Addictions Committee, the York Region Youth Strategy,
Youth Speak, and the Georgina Affordable Housing Coalition. Through these committees, he uses his voice to help advocate for youth who are struggling with mental health addictions, gender identity, and bullying, as well as creating plans to help streamline services for youth transitioning from youth to adult services. Through 360 Kids, substance use program, he facilitated presentations to youth regarding the harms of cannabis on young minds. His hope for the future is to continue advocating for others while learning to be a social worker. Please help me welcome Jesse to the panel.
Later statement on the subject matter. The moderator will then direct 1 to 2 general questions to the panel, and then the audience will be invited to participate. The moderator's formative questions were predetermined and made known to the panel. Questions from the audience are unscripted. Finally, a 2-minute time limit will be provided for each response from the panel, and if time permits, each panelist will be provided with 2 minutes to share their final reflections. The first question for the panelists is, what are the root causes of youth homelessness in equity-seeking and/or Indigenous communities?
And you can choose to give that 2-minute elevator speech as to frame your approach and your thinking around the issue before answering. Or you can just go straight into it.
Are you going in order this time? Okay, bonjour, Ani and Amber Crone, Dishnakaz, Alderville First Nation in Dunpa. My pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. And I want to thank Hilton, who's out of the room at the moment, and Elder Miller as well for the opening, and the musicians are gone as well. But I don't think it's any accident that that is how we opened, and that is what we included as part of this conversation. And I would say that because so much about homelessness is not about the current moment. It's really about the history that brought the person to the current moment that has contributed to the situation of homelessness. In Canada, Indigenous people are far more likely to be homeless than the rest of the population. 1 in 15 Indigenous people in urban centres in Canada experience homelessness, which is in comparison to only 1 in 128. So that number again, 1 in 128 for the general population, 1 in 15 for Indigenous peoples. In some areas of the country, such as Winnipeg and Thunder Bay, 50 to 70% of the homeless population is Indigenous. In Toronto, Canada's largest urban centre, Indigenous people make up to 23% of the city's homeless population, even though they make up less than 1% of Toronto's population. So these statistics reveal that urban Indigenous people are 8 times more likely to experience homelessness than non-Indigenous people. So the situation is dire, and like I said, it comes about because of historical contexts that we've heard a little bit about tonight. Thank you, Michael. And the contributing factors include poverty, childhood trauma and abuse, as well as having an Indigenous identity, and child welfare involvement, which might be why I was invited to contribute to the evening, because of being a child well-being agency that has the authority to conduct protection services for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit population. The outcomes for children who are involved in the child welfare system are extremely poor, and homelessness is one of those factors. So that's what I would say in opening remarks. And the first question was, how did we get here? So I think I've answered a little bit of that in the opening remarks, but I would also just say, to keep in context the definition of home and how that differs across cultures. And in mainstream, and I'm generalizing, but in mainstream definition, a home is a physical structure where a nucleus family lives together, but for other cultures and for Indigenous cultures, home encompasses a much larger definition that involves our spirituality, our connection to land, our practices and customs. And so home, we have been dispossessed from over generations and through child welfare policies. And that's part of how we got here.
So when I listen and when I think about this, this has been a question that I've been thinking about for a very, very long time. I think about some of the history of this country where individuals came to settle, in quotes, I'll use that term, and I think about how their decision was that although they were trying to find a passage to India, what they really wanted to do, and I would say Europeans wanted to be able to have as much control over the world as possible. And that had a huge impact on the Indigenous population on Turtle Island. But it also had an impact on those individuals who came through this transatlantic slavery. And when you listen to Black youth, and they tell you about how often they are stopped by the police, when they have done absolutely nothing but walk along the road, you have to start to ask yourself why. Why is this happening to different parts and different sectors and different people? Why is this not happening to everybody? Why is it that Black, Indigenous, and youth of color are more likely to be seen to commit crimes, although they aren't more likely to commit crimes? They're followed in stores. Our family has had that experience. They are also asked in education systems, they are potentially told that they aren't able to succeed in the way that other youth are encouraged to succeed. We really have to look at why this is happening and how do we unlearn and dismantle everything so that the trajectory for Black, Indigenous, and youth of color changes in this country. It's really critical that we do this.
It's me. Okay. Well, a little bit of an introduction. So, as part of my work that I do with the Queer Agenda, we do education curriculums where we try to bring awareness towards 2S LGBTQ knowledge across community organizations and community partners, right? And through building this education curriculum, I have to do a lot of research as to what actually happened. Because if you notice, there's a huge change in attitudes towards 2S LGBTQ and 2S LGBTQ homelessness all over the world, and you wonder why is that, right? And through extensive research, the answer, unfortunately, is always westernization, right, and colonization. It's actually insane, right? Because if you look a little bit further into it, most societies had some kind of queer identity, had some kind of queer art, queer presence, and all of that was silenced, all of that was erased when the first law towards homosexuality was put in place in 1533, which is coincidentally around the time of colonization, right? And so through the work that I do, we try to approach queerness on a more global scale. And when you notice, when you look into queer pride movements, you start to notice that a lot of the people who are at the forefront of these movements were at risk and homeless individuals, right? Even the first pride movement in Stonewall was led by people of color, people who had experience with homelessness, with criminality. And when answering this question of what is the root causes of homelessness, it's interesting because I think about my my own experiences and asking myself, what is a home, right? And I love that we mentioned today that there is the historical context and there's also the concept of home, because if you're lucky, you have quite a firm, definitive answer on what is home. But if you're unlucky, if you're a person who's part of a minority group, if you're an immigrant like me, then you find out that home is not such a direct concept, right? And this is, I think, the root cause of homelessness is that we lack interventions when it comes to mental health at a very early age. We lack education around home and being able to build a home and being able to build the life skills that are required to build that home. But overall, in conclusion, I really do think that it's early intervention and Canada building a capacity to not only house individuals who are Canadian born and raised, but also individuals who are immigrants, refugees, Indigenous youth who are part of many cultural and diverse communities, so that they can all build a home, right, in the way that is most appropriate to them.
Great. So for me, I would just like to begin by once again thanking both the elders, the MPPs who are gone, Michael for you, and Kanisha for introducing us and setting the tone for today's conversation. And again, to go off what everybody else has said, I love how, historically speaking, these issues have been prevalent. And as someone with lived experience with some of these things, I can only imagine how much more difficult it is for the other populations who are statistically more likely to experience these things on a higher degree based off the intersecting factors of LGBTQ+ or addictions, or even just being of another culture or different in general. So to really define how I view this issue is that, like everybody says, and even historically speaking, home is defined differently, but home should be wherever you feel safe and comfortable. And within today's society, and historically speaking as well, there's never been a time where anybody can truly feel at home unless it is with people who understand. And right now there's misunderstanding or miscommunication or lack of information that creates these stigmas and biases and barriers for people who are experiencing homelessness, especially within the equity-seeking Indigenous populations or LGBTQ+ communities. For me, I really do feel like education or misunderstanding is one of those things that need to be addressed for everyone to feel as if we can create a sense of community. That is where I stand.
Okay. So,
Thank you, panelists.
Systems. I know systems very well, unfortunately. And I would love to, all governmental systems, right? So what do I refer to when I say governmental systems? I mean anything that is funded or run by the Canadian government, right? So that would be CAS, that would be the education system, that would be anything that is related to governmental employment, such as community workers who are either non-for-profit, so funded by people in the community who have decided out of the grace of their heart to give money to fund these communities, or governmental grants, right? But what does that mean? That means that all of these different groups, all of these different aspects of Canadian life is being run by the Canadian government. And where was the Canadian government built? Who built it, right? It's settlers, right? But people, it was built by people who thought that they were doing everyone who wasn't European a favor by saying that we're going to make your life better, and we're going to make you into a better person. And what we're doing is a favor by modernizing you and westernizing you, right? That's what's considered the correct and appropriate way. And although we have made so much effort to be more inclusive and try to understand all the people that we have wronged, we continue to operate with this subliminal thought that westernization means, or Western concepts mean that it's good and that it's modern, right? And anything that doesn't fit in that criteria should have less and should change to be in accordance with these Western concepts, to a point where you'll see that anyone who doesn't attribute themselves to Western concepts, to Western ways of living, can't benefit of the same privileges, right? Even so, I was having this conversation with my partner because a lot of the clients that I work with are clients who are immigrants, clients who are refugees. And it's such an disappointing and interesting concept to see where the Canadian government tells you immigrants should come to Canada. Refugees are welcome to Canada. You can build a life here. And then they come to Canada and then they can't have their education recognized. They can't find a job to make an income to survive, a job in the field that they studied because their education isn't recognized, right? And then not only do you have parents who are struggling and who are frustrated and who are dealing with all of these issues, but you have the youth, the children who are suffering the consequences of the kind of life that their parents had to lead by coming to this country, right? And ultimately, we have to let go of the concept that westernization is good, because that is not the answer and that is not what brings us together. That's not human, right? That's my 2 cents.
Well, I think that the common denominator within all of our shared ideas here today are pretty evident. Government systems. And I may sound like a conspiracy theorist for saying this, but I believe that it's control. I mean, if we take, for example, the colonization and even some Western ideas based around modern concepts or the modernization of concepts, a lot of these concepts were actually taken from other cultures and other people that were colonized or were here before us, and where their ideas were taken and rearranged to make them submissive, or at least that's what they want us to believe. I don't believe in any of those systems. I don't believe in the healthcare. I don't believe in the education. I don't believe in our justice systems, and I don't believe in any of the systems made by our government are effective. I believe that the educational system, especially with the levels of the applied, locally developed, and the academic streams, are very detrimental to people with equity-seeking or LGBTQ+, people, youth of color, or Indigenous youth. It's very harmful. For example, there was a class that I had wanted to take back when I was in school, but because I was in applied, they had told me, you cannot take this because you need to have academic sciences for this. This course was an outdoor course. Who needs academic sciences to go on a new book? And so for me, having these challenges, I felt as if the educational system was telling me, you're too dumb for this, which I believe is very harmful way of looking at this, but for people who are equity seeking, it is something they feel already, that they have these challenges, that the educational system's barriers can't be overcome because either they don't believe in themselves or because they're made to believe that they can't become more than what they are. As for the justice system, it is the same thing. There's no supports within there for youth who may have disabilities or are Indigenous to have other ways, such as I forget what they call it, sorry, in the Indigenous ways of the healing circle, or the yes, where they come together for justice. And I believe that is a lot more effective culturally and culturally appropriate for those youth, and for youth who are having challenges with equity seeking, deterrence programs, to have counseling and other things in place so that they don't have this record that follows them and creates more barriers towards when they are out, education or employment or income supports. And then the healthcare, of course, once you are diagnosed, a lot of times, especially when you are young, symptoms that are shown are very similar to other disabilities or diagnoses. And so you may be misdiagnosed, and when you go to get those income supports, they ask you for verification of these things, which can be hard to do because specialists and doctors, they don't always agree on each other. And there's always this loop that you have to go through, which makes a much harder time for youth who are equity seeking, Indigenous or LGBTQ+ to actually hurdle over and go through these things to prove themselves, which shouldn't even be a barrier in the first place.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to ask if anyone from the audience has any questions. Okay. Sorry, I have a question. Many people have mentioned that government not hearing or asking for the evidence and the solutions and not acting. In your opinion, what can we do to get government to act? What more can we do is a better question, I think, in your mind.
Anyone could answer that.
Well, I'll jump in. Let's see what you think. With all due respect to the majority of individuals who wish to run for election, those who truly, I think, can make change have no desire to do it through the political system because of the way they're treated by the media, by others, by potentially all of us in one way, shape, or form. And I think as a result of that, we don't actually have probably our best minds working hard to make those changes. I think it then becomes much more difficult for us. I don't know how, I'm not a politician, but every time I read about a politician, all they're thinking about is how they're going to get reelected. And I sit there and I think to myself, these changes are so deep. It's not going to happen in 2 years or 4 years or 6 years. We've seen it not happen in that time. But somewhere along the way, I think we as a society have to make a commitment that all of that has to change. If we truly believe that change is where we need to go.
I was going to say something similar. Because if you look around the room, we have some pictures looking at it. And what I would say about that is that it shows very clearly a pendulum. And we need to stop the polarization and come together. And I picked this blade of sweetgrass out because Elder Hilton will often talk about this particular medicine in our traditions, and it is representative of kindness, but it's also about strength because one blade is easily broken where this one can't be. So we need to come together, and we need to stop the pendulum swinging from right to left constantly and from extremes. And I was just at a presentation last week that talked about the increasing polarization of society, not only in Canada, but globally. And they actually had a chart that showed different countries in the world, and it was a chart like this with a thing that went up like that, and if you were here, you were low polarization. If you were in that stream in the middle, you were in danger of becoming too polarized, and if you were on the top part of it, you were beyond polarized. And our neighbors to the south were up here. And Canada was almost into that danger zone. And that is scary and breaks my heart. And I think that it's one of the most indicative things of the problems to come. And we need to stop that. And I think that our governments and our politicians are incredibly important in that. And I agree with you that we don't have with all due respect to anyone who's in office or has sought office in the past, we don't have our best people because our best people don't want to be treated that way and don't want to stand up and scream at each other on TV and ask stupid questions.
So before we go to either Jesse or Zach, if indeed you want to take an answer, I just want to ask the audience to let us know where you're from, because our panel is very Ontario-centric. So if you're out of province, if you're somewhere else in Canada, let us know your reflection in terms of what's happening, where you're at, prior to asking you a question. So just to get a sense as to who's in the room. Okay, so Jesse, you want to answer? If not, we could always ask something else of the audience. So think of a question you want to ask us.
I think there's a...
I have a question, Tanisha, from New York Crusade Society. One of the biggest pieces you talk about, this fatigue that various communities have provided feedback, recommendations, and solutions. And one of the biggest pieces in trying to implement it in an organization is resistance. And I think sometimes we minimize how huge that piece is for systemic change. So just bringing it to the panelists around any recommendations or thoughts you have in tackling some of those resistance that does show up systemically.
So in many ways, I think that the commitment has to come from the top. And if the commitment isn't there from the top, it's going to be exceedingly difficult to make that change. When I think of even the organization that I'm with, we actually developed an anti-oppression, anti-racism framework. And the reason for doing that was to ensure that all of our work, no matter where you were in the organization, was looking at it through that lens. We're still on a journey. We will always be on that journey. There's no question that there has been pushback. To the extent where I have been told that individuals feel that there is reverse racism, which academically does not exist. But we have kept going because of the belief and the importance. And I'm not just talking about from the top staff-wise, I'm talking about from the board. That you have to have that commitment as a board as well as senior leadership. Otherwise, I think you're doing a huge disservice to the people that you are serving. And in the end, that is who we should be most concerned about. The people we are serving, because we should be serving them. We are not telling them what to do. We should be serving them. And that also means, for those of us at the top, you're serving your staff. It's not always easy to do, and I understand that, but I think it's a real important piece. I don't know if that helps to answer the question, but.
Jesse, you're edging to get in there? Am I reading you okay?
Just a little. I think it's a mix of love and opposition, right? I'm a very oppositional person, or maybe I'm just young. And I always have been oppositional, to a point where it actually probably caused a lot of the conflict that I've had throughout my youth and teenage years, right? But all of this opposition led to the fact that I refused to back down when I believed in something and when I defended something. And even to this day, if there is something that I think is wrong, if there is a gap, if there is something that isn't being done, even within our services with the queer agenda, I am not shy to be oppositional and to say, no, this has to be different, something has to be done. And I am sometimes known as annoying because I will not shut up. It's amazing, right? But not just oppositional, but love. Because we have learned, so through training in community services, you learn that when someone is escalated, when someone is potentially aggressive, violent, the last thing you want to do is tell that person, no, stop that. The last thing you want to do is put more barriers and tell someone that they're wrong. And this is sort of a concept of care, of love. It's saying that although you are escalated, although you are taking on a behavior that you shouldn't take, I will be here to be the counter of this behavior, of this approach. And this is really, this is really the importance of love and care. And I guess to give an example, so a lot of my lived experience comes from my relationship with my parents, right? And I had to keep myself safe by being oppositional, right? And by doing everything against what was happening to me to make sure that I survived and to make sure that I succeeded. And I was very lucky with a lot of the things that I've had so far. But I never shied away from being honest and telling my parents exactly what was wrong. And they hated it. But it served because they learned from it. And today I can say that my sisters are living a much better life than me. And not only that, but through time you realize that you want a relationship with your family, you want a relationship with your community, with the people who raised you, the people that you come from. And so you put aside your pride, you put aside your ego, you put aside whatever prevents you from connecting with them and being loving and saying, you did hurt me, and I still love you, and I still care about you, because you can't expect kindness without showing that kindness first.
Zach, you're looking at us?
Yeah, I was going to say, I like both sides of what's been said so far, right? For me, I'm very much the same. I was very oppositional. But instead of wanting to cultivate that relationship with my family, I took a different approach. I find, like, just much like a fruit tree, sometimes you have to cut off the negative in order to grow. And not necessarily to kill off that fruit, but to have it plant its own seeds and not to have it infest your own roots. So for me, I really feel like sometimes cutting off parts of that connection can help you grow. And I would really relate that to the government. That in structure, the government changes, but does our Senate. The Senate has been the same for however many years, and that's where I feel everything revolves. We can have as many MPs, mayors, provincial parliament come and have lived experience or advocate for people with lived experience, but as long as they have to go through certain tiers of the government that don't change, there's not going to be any progress forward. As long as we are able to cut that out and to have new roots come in and expand on our ideas and to have new ways of being able to feed the information and have it grow, we can finally make change. So to connect with some parts and keep it growing is good, but sometimes we do need to cut out what's not working, or the people who are just keeping us down in order to express the kindness and love that we have inside us. And while we may still love these people, they aren't detrimental or helpful for our own growth unless we are able to find it within ourselves to give to others.
Does anyone else from the audience have any questions at this time for our panelists?
If there are none, I wanted to just add one more thing. I appreciate and agree with the other comments, and the only other thing that I would say in response to your question about resistance and wanting to stay in the current, like people don't like change, people fear what the change means for them. And I think one of the learnings for me over the past several years of living and working within a system and within legislation that doesn't necessarily support the way that we want to do the work that we do is the concept of two-eyed seeing, which just says that you can see and operate from two different ways. And I find that when you value what there is to value in the current way, it makes it more acceptable to those who are resisting change if they know that some of the current is going to come with the system, right? So to know that you're not letting go of and entirely abandoning everything you know and have learned and went to school for, etc. Like if you devalue what is valuable to them, the resistance will rise up and be strong, right? But if you show your value for what works in the system, and this is my commitment to reconciliation, and I know I have not sounded much like I have a commitment to reconciliation tonight, but I really do, and that I think that's what first came to my mind when you asked the question about how do you deal with resistance to change, is the two-eyed seeing and making sure that you aren't devaluing things that are valued by others, but finding a way for the two things to coexist.
Thank you.
Appreciate that, Amber, and it actually made me think about some of the conversation I was hearing earlier, and I'm curious any of your thoughts around what we hear about dismantling the system. So I think all four of you talked about the colonization, Western ways of doing things, and we live in a Western society, so how do you manage that reality that you're in these systems? There's pressure to dismantle the system, but then there's also, you talk about change coming forward. So do we dismantle it? What does that look like? Do we bring things forward? What do we bring forward? What don't we bring? I'm just curious about your thoughts.
For me in child welfare and, the 60 scoop residential school, even before that, the missionaries, they targeted children and the education of children as part of our colonization and our assimilation. And so within, and in particular in child welfare since the 60s scoop, we have so much example of how that system is broken. And some of you, if you're in child welfare, will know that a few years ago, one of the ministers got in a lot of trouble for saying, no, actually, I think it might have been the Premier of Ontario, Premier Wynne, said we're gonna blow up the system, speaking about child welfare. And the response that got in the mainstream children's aid sector was extreme anger and extreme insult. And like I said, that comes because that saying that you're going to blow up the system means that there's nothing good about the system, right? And I don't think that's true. I think there's a lot broken about the system, but it's not entirely absolute. All of it needs to go in the garbage, right? There are pieces of it that are okay, but you need to sift and keep the nuggets, right? You need to keep what's good about the systems that we have and get rid of the stuff that's oppressive and racist and not good for a country or a people. And our systems, my response at the provincial meetings where people were really angry at the Premier, I said, I'm not understanding why people are so angry at that comment, because this, and I talked about all of the things that are wrong in child welfare, and I said, I'm sorry, what part of that do you want to keep? What part of that do you not want to blow up, right? So I think it's just stopping the pendulum. You don't have to blow it up, but you can't keep it all either, right? You got to come together in the middle and have some perspective.
I think, just before I lose my train of thought here, I think I definitely agree. But I feel it needs to be done slowly. We need to take out the bad slowly in order to introduce that new image. For example, if you take a look around the room, we have the pictures. You can see time goes on, but the image is practically the same. So, in order for this to change, we need to slowly get people used to the idea that these things aren't beneficial and that they do need to be changed. It may take a while, but like fruit trees again, it takes a while for them to grow and reach their full potential. So we need to cultivate it, and we need to make sure that it's done right in order for the fruit to blossom. Once that change is there, that's when we need to have more lived experience and more people with knowledge pertaining to specific areas that can really dive deep and make sure that it's done correctly, add more things. For example, counseling, I'm not sure how many people have experienced that, but a lot of them believe they're right just because they have an education. No offense to anybody who may be in that field, but
the system apart or abolish it. We could actually use what's working, and then slowly, to Zach's words, to slowly diminish and eventually get rid of what's not working. We heard a lot of how various systems are impacting youth homelessness, especially child welfare. We hear of the educational system through Penny, how it's undermining and not setting up certain identities for success, and how that impacts and fuels homelessness. And we heard about politicians a lot and what they're not doing. And perhaps at another time, another conversation, we could find out what to do with them. As Amber mentioned, there's so many different reports and recommendations and all that. So the information is there. How do you get them to act? How do you get them to move beyond just
re-election.
They can do it, they showed us in the pandemic.
Yeah, they shut everything down. Did you see that? They were able to just quickly just shut everything down and redirect funds and all that, and did some work. So they can do it. They can do it, but they're returning back to their old ways, to the status quo. So with that said, I'd like to thank you for co-moderating with me. I'm going to invite David French to the floor to speak on behalf of Our Way Home Canada. David is the Director General of Government Relations and Policy of Way Home Canada, Edmonton/Toronto area. So David, can you come to the floor, and then I'll call upon Elder King to close us off in a good way.
You just don't want to stay up here. I'm going to compliment you before you leave. Yeah, you know, Away Home Canada making the shift, Youth Homelessness Social Innovation Lab. We're really grateful for the opportunity to sponsor this event or co-sponsor this event and help host it and tethering it. I love the language around tethering this to our National Learning Community meeting. You know, you started tonight with Elder King, and thank you to our knowledge keepers for coming. And Elder King spoke to storytelling and how important that is in our work and how important that is into the nature of how we can evolve and change. And I think as we sat here and heard stories from our panelists and heard stories from our knowledge keepers and heard the stories of music, it really brought us back to why and how we can influence change. And as a bureaucrat, former bureaucrat in recovery, I'm not going to touch on politics. I won't go there. I was sort of stewing in my seat because I have some opinions about the permission we can provide politicians if we educate properly. And tonight was a really important educational opportunity, and they missed out. And it's our commitment for us to continue to do these types of things because I call them the ears. And as somebody who's been in a policy space for 20 years, I've spent a lot of years hosting opportunities like this. And so we have to continue to do that because there'll be a moment where you get a set of ears in the room and you'll turn them on. And that shifts things and that changes things. And so in closing, I'd like to thank Clovis and 360 Kids. We sometimes view youth-serving organizations as these ones who are changing lives and working at the front line and seeing the whites of the eyes of these young people, but there's so much more than that. They're conveners, they're storytellers themselves, they're movement shapers, and they're organizations with a ton of confidence. And these kinds of opportunities are distilled because your organization has confidence. And so I want to congratulate you on that. Because it takes a lot. Organize an opportunity for dialogue and for us to shift the movement. So I saw the need to move tonight, and it did. And we can continue to let it move if we allow these conversations to flourish. So, on behalf of the Way Home,
everybody coming tonight, Creator loves song, you know, and we have many songs. Like I say, we have ceremonial songs, powwow songs, but every time we do these songs, they relate to something. And so with this closing song, I want to say Chumi Gwach Guibaja Wina Magadok Mampi Miss Mishomis Chumi Gwach Widoka Mampi Bamatzawen Chumi Gwach Kenegego Gamija Yang Osa Bamatzawen Widokoshnam Janamiyang Kwayak Jabamoseyang Chumi Gwach Vijamanado Gamija Yang Gagat Sanan Gwach Gabanochi Don Wawana Jamachi Kwai. So I just I asked the spirits that came and sat with us, and so now or when they sing them, we always have to guide spirit. You know, we're always guiding spirit, and that's that worldview that, you know, I think we were all talking about. You know, and then like without this vessel, without this physical vessel, the spirit can't live here. So when we make those connections to that vessel, when holistically, when we make that connection, that's where the spirit gets direction. So that disconnect that we all have, that's not a disconnect if we know what spirit is. A spirit is pure. A spirit is a spirit is forever. It comes, it does the work, then it goes back. You know, the spirit is forever. That's in the teachings. So when we think of the youth that we're here, and the things that they say, they're bringing that good spirit, you know, to us to live the good life here. So I'm going to offer a song, and everybody has to participate. So you have to stand up. And you ever go to I'm sure some of you have been to a powwow, right? Yeah. So you always follow the lead drummer. So I'm the lead drummer. So you got to follow me, okay?